It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Tuesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On Bills is sponsored by SimpliSafe Home Security. With Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe, 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police response. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Visit simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. Well, folks, we have a ton of great questions to get into today that have been submitted for Herd Mentality. We're going to cover a lot of the stuff that is on everybody's mind. And so here's my answers to that. Let's get started. The first one comes from John. John says, like you mentioned in the game recap, I've seen a lot of negativity about Dorsey and the offense of late. What do you make of these gritty wins? I personally feel like it shows the Bills have the perseverance to win games in January and hopefully February. Playoff games are not usually blowouts. So I have some more thoughts about Ken Dorsey that I'm going to give you in my answer to the next question. But for this one, I really want to focus in on John's specific question. That is, what do you make of these gritty wins? And I've tried throughout the last several weeks to weave into my analysis my appreciation for them being able to pull out some challenging games and some situations where they didn't necessarily dominate their opponent, but won a football game. And it's a big shift in what we saw over the first couple of games this season, and then at times in the middle, and then really since the second half of the Green Bay game. The Bills have won a lot of games, but they haven't necessarily been a dominant football team. I've went on a lot of rants about that. And it's interesting to me because when the Bills are dominating their opponents, which have happened quite a bit over the last 3 years, a lot of people say, well, they're not a complete enough football team. They're too reliant on Josh Allen. They need more. And now they're doing more around Josh Allen in terms of some opportunistic plays on defense, running the football a little bit more. And now it's about, well, can they be dominant? Can they blow out teams? I think we have to stop moving the goalpost. We really do. They blow teams out. People say they can't win close games. They win close games. People say they aren't dominant. I really appreciate the fact that the Bills showed up in ways this year that I don't think we've seen since the beginning of 2020. And yes, that's come with some gritty wins, if that's what you want to call them, and not necessarily as many boat races. But I don't think we've seen this type of resilience from the Bills since early 2020. I really don't. And I think that can help them going into the postseason where, to be completely honest with you, they're going to be missing some stuff. There's no Micah Hyde. There's no Von Miller. There's no veteran number 2 receiver. There's no Cole Beasley. And so I think them being able to win games in different ways, that is a little bit of opportunistic defense. That is some run game. That is still plenty of Josh Allen doing amazing things on the football field. I think that can really help them the rest of the way. Would I prefer that every game looked like the Titans win? Yeah, sure, absolutely. That ain't the league. That's never been the league. I think the fact that they're winning these tight games and doing what it takes to win while still showing the ability to be dominant at times, and certainly there's been games this year where they've been dominant, I feel pretty good. How did you feel about the Bills after the Falcons win last year, the Panthers win, that late win against the Jets? Were those dominant wins? The Bills were 7-6 through 13 games last year. They're 10-3 this year. I think we can agree that we're hopeful for a switch to be flipped on offense. But there's a lot to like about the makeup of this football team. And I'm choosing to cling to that. Elizabeth says, my enjoyment of the most recent Bills win against the Jets has been somewhat tempered by the chorus of fans and commentators lamenting Dorsey's play calling, especially for lack of creativity. But I've heard other folks say that Dorsey must be saving things for our toughest remaining opponents in the playoffs. Is this realistic or just wishful thinking? How frequently do offensive coordinators hold things back? I understand a wrinkle here or there, but aren't live game reps valuable? That's a great question, Elizabeth. And I'll use this as an opportunity to address specifically what you've said here, but also some of my general thoughts on the offense in Ken Dorsey. I first of all, for your question, I do think that there is some truth to that where you want to evolve your scheme and put certain things on film and not put certain things on film so that way you can unlock those at the right moments. I think you've seen that from, watching Brian Dable throughout the years where usually the playoff games, there's some wrinkles, there's some things that you didn't see before on tape. And so I'm sure there's some of that and how they want the team to look in the postseason. We know that last year the Bills are pretty intentional about the way that they handled some of their personnel, trying to make sure that they're ready for later in the season. And in particular, you think about what Josh Allen said himself about Stephon Diggs and, maybe at times going away from him so that way that he'd be fresh for the postseason, kind of looking back at 2020 and the injuries to Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs and how that impacted the team later that year. And so I know that there's always some intentionality with all of that. But I think for Ken Dorsey, and I don't want everyone to sit here and think that I'm saying that Ken Dorsey has been an A-plus offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. I'm not saying that. But I think he does get some criticism that I don't think is warranted, and I think a lot of it lacks context. And I think the reality is that he's still finding his rhythm, and his rhythm as a play caller, his rhythm on what he wants the scheme to look like, and his rhythm on how he wants to deploy his personnel. And maybe you should say, well, that was the benefit of hiring Ken Dorsey to be the offensive coordinators because you feel like he got ahead of some of that because he's been on the team for 3 years before becoming the OC. All right, okay, fair enough. I think there's a big difference between being in that seat and pulling all the levers and not, even if you've been around the team. I will say this, that I've yet to watch a Bills game this year and thought to myself, you know what? Ken Dorsey didn't give this team a chance to be successful on offense. Have I agreed with everything? No. Do I wish there were some wrinkles that were different? Do I wish that the short passing game was back in the mix? Do I wish that the balance with the run calls were better? Yes, absolutely. Do I wish that he moved the launch point a little bit more for Josh Allen? Yeah. I wish there was more under center stuff, more play action. Yes, all of those things are true. But I don't necessarily think that there's been a game this year where I said, you know what, Ken Dorsey didn't give this team a chance to be successful on offense. And that's why I was very deliberate in what I did yesterday on the podcast in going through moments where the offense didn't come up with the play that Ken Dorsey put them in position to make. Whether it was on the first drive, the 3rd and 2, Josh not being able to hit a wide open Stephon Diggs, the John Brown play where the throw was underthrown and Sauce Gardner interfered with him, the Isaiah McKenzie drop. I mean, those were moments that even the Dawson Knox play at the very end of the game when the Bills were trying to go for the dagger and end the game with a first down. The Josh Allen missed read on the run. I feel like Ken Dorsey, you could say whatever you want about his scheme or not liking things. I think that he put the team in good spots to make plays. They just didn't make them. A missed read by Josh or an underthrow by Josh or a drop pass by McKenzie or Knox or Singletary. That's not Ken Dorsey. There's things that Ken Dorsey needs to improve upon. But I think sometimes we don't want to admit that, Josh missed a throw. Josh missed a read. A guy dropped the pass. It's easy to side with the players. We love the players, right? We love the players. Those are our guys. But then when they don't do well, it's, what's wrong with the coach? Well, most of the time it comes down to execution. There's plays to be made. So there's a lot to foil together there. And like I said, I don't think he's doing an A-plus job. I don't. But I also don't feel like he's done a bad job of putting the team in positions to be successful on offense. And we have got to go. What was the turning point of the season offensively? It was the second half against Green Bay. The second half. Up to that point, we're sitting here worried that Ken Dorsey's going to be hired as some team's head coach. Didn't want to lose him, right? What happened in the second half against Green Bay? The Bills started turning over the football. And they had a really bad stretch of like 10 quarters where they turned the ball over 6 times. And they had to adjust from that because it was going to kill the season if they kept on turning over the football at that rate. They weren't going to be able to go anywhere. They weren't going to win the division. And so I think that it has been a lot of balancing together the uptick in turnovers that had to be corrected. And so maybe you had to neuter the offense a little bit to make sure that you have a chance to win. But also the Josh Allen elbow injury. Josh Allen having confidence in what's going on around him, whether that's protection or weapons. Consistency from the weapons. Do they have a number 2 receiver? Onboarding Nyheim Hines. I mean, there's weather, right? The good last game against the Jets is a tough situation. It's cold, wet, and windy, and it's a great defense. Not being able to practice for a stretch of time there. I think there's a lot that goes into it. It's not one thing, but you kind of blend all that together, and I guess I'm a little unsurprised that the offense hasn't been super dominant. Do you think the Bills have a dominant offensive line? Do you think the Bills have a complete set of weapons? I don't know that I say yes to the answer. My answer to either of those questions is yes. Meanwhile, Josh is playing through an elbow issue. I think there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. And I don't think it's as simple as saying Ken Dorsey's holding this football team back. Hopefully that made sense. But I think kind of being able to thread that needle between being aggressive and not putting the team in bad spots and working through that turnover stretch with all the other layers to it plays into my thought process. But the Bills offense has been statistically very, very good this year. Peter says, how many drops today, referring to the Jets game, and how much do you think that impacted the game? And corollary, is Shakir that not ready that he couldn't do better than Mick dropped it again? And I guess Mick dropped it again is Isaiah McKenzie, who had 2 drops against the Jets. Singletary had 1, Knox had 1, so 4 drops in the game. I think the reality is Isaiah McKenzie is a high variance player. He's always been a high variance player. That's been true. I've watched this kid since Georgia. He's always been a high variance player. And when you compare Shakir to McKenzie, you're talking about very different skill sets. So far this season, Khalil Shakir, and remember, he's a rookie, a 5th-round rookie, has played 29% of the team's offensive snaps. I mean, there's times where Crowder was available and kind of took away from his opportunity. Meanwhile, Isaiah McKenzie has played 55% of the offensive snaps. So he's played a lot more, but you kind of expect that to be the case. So Shakir's on the field. He's just not getting a lot of opportunity to catch the ball. Josh isn't throwing in the ball. They're not being very intentional about creating looks or bumping up Shakir in the progressions. So in a complex passing offense, I think it's a big ask for Khalil Shakir to be able to step in right away and be a volume target for this team. Maybe that'll happen in time. I thought it was more of a next year and the year after type situation. But in the meantime, I think you enjoy what you get from Isaiah McKenzie and understand that he's told you since he's the first time I ever watched him play football at Georgia that he's a high variance player. But you get a lot of good to go with the bad. But the bad really kind of, it stings, right? You expect him to do good things, and so you enjoy that, but you really focus in on those lowlights because that's not the expectation, and they sting. And that's what Isaiah McKenzie did to us against the Jets. But 2 great games before that, right, against the Patriots and the Lions. So he's just an inconsistent player. And I think in time, Shakir will be positioned well to take over that role. But maybe that's not right now because he's on the field, a third of the snaps and he's not getting a lot of opportunity. Jesse says, where does the Bills' strength of schedule currently stand? The Lions' win is looking better with each passing week. Go Bills. I tried to tell you guys about the Lions. They're a good ball team, good football team. The Bills' strength of schedule is the 7th hardest in the NFL so far. The opponents they've faced have a 530 win percentage, 7th hardest in the league, and they've got some quality records coming up. Right, the Dolphins, they're 8-5. The Bengals are 9-4. The Patriots around 500, and then you got the Bears who they have 2 or 3 wins. So it'll probably be a little bit higher when it's all said and done. But the Bills are probably going to face, at the end of the day, a top 10 hardest schedule based on win percentage of opponents. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all over at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well over at BetOnline. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. The next one today comes from Mark, who says, loving this 4-game winning streak. Would love to get your take on Jerry Sullivan's comment to Josh in the post-game presser. To a media outsider like myself, it seemed unnecessary after a hard-fought, if not always pretty, divisional win. I know Jerry has a history of these sorts of things, and I appreciated Josh's restraint in the answer. But what are your thoughts on this interaction and maybe some post-game questions to players in general? So Jerry Sullivan's always kind of had that reputation of somebody that's willing to push some buttons. And in other media markets, there's a lot of Jerry Sullivans out there pushing buttons. I think that's why he really stands out in Buffalo, where he's that guy that'll really try to trigger some responses. And obviously he went into those post-game press conferences with an agenda to really put the offense at the forefront and see what type of sound bites he can get. My issue with that moment that everyone's referring to, where Josh says, okay, and just kind of rolls his eyes a little bit, is that Jerry didn't ask him a question. He didn't ask him a question. He shared his opinion. He said, it doesn't look like an offense that's good enough to win the Super Bowl right now. That's not a question. Ask him a question. Say, Josh, do you feel like your offense is good enough to win the Super Bowl right now? He might say something interesting there. He's not going to say anything interesting to you saying it doesn't look like an offense that's good enough to win the Super Bowl right now. What type of response do you think you're going to get? And credit to Josh for how he handled it. Just said, okay, kind of rolled his eyes and was ready for that next question. But post-game questions are generally boring. A lot of times you're just trying to get quotes to tie together your game recap story. If it were me asking questions, I would try to emphasize situational moments, scheme, thought process, try to force them out of generalized responses and see if I can get some actual insight. But I understand that's tough to do. But that's what I would try to get out of those moments. But yeah, my issue with the whole thing is that he didn't ask him a question. He took a press conference as an opportunity to share his own opinion. Well, that's what the article's for. That's what your analysis after the game is for you to share your opinion. Not to Josh Allen at a press conference. Dominic says, I've noticed on Twitter there is a decent amount of other fan bases that say Matt Milano is a dirty player and plays cheap. Do you think this is the case? Yeah, that was weird after the game, right? The hits on Mike White were hard, physical, tough hits, but they were all clean. They were textbook. Football's a physical, violent game. I mean, that stuff happens. So I don't know what happened in that game that would inspire fans to label Milano a dirty player. Ndamukong Suh's a dirty player. Henry Anderson's a dirty player. Julian Edelman's a dirty player. Matt Milano's a good football player that I've never thought of as a dirty player at all. And so I think that's just fan banter, not liking a rival team's player. The Bills got a target on their back. I'm sure Jets, Dolphins, and Patriots fans hate the Bills deeply. it is what it is, but I don't think that Matt Milano's a dirty football player. I've never once thought of him through that lens. Tony says, now that we've seen some film on Tre'Davious White, how do you think he's playing? I know he gave up a few receptions this past weekend to Wilson, but I know that doesn't tell the whole story. Well, as far as Tre'Davious White goes, I think it's, first of all, it's great that he played 100% of the snaps against the Jets, right? That we've wanted to see him ramp up to this point. It didn't take long for him to go from 20 to the majority to all of the snaps here. I like that he, for a good part of this game, followed around Garrett Wilson and shadowed him. You know, that was an indicator to me that he believed and the coaching staff believed that he was ready to go up against number one receivers. I thought he was extremely competitive. I think his movement skills look fine to me. But I think at the same time, the dynamic plays haven't been there yet, right? We haven't seen him really invade the catch point and disrupt. We haven't seen him take away the football. We haven't seen him have some of those patented moments where he throws off the menu with his ability to read the backfield and cue in and force the quarterback to refocus his eyes. Like, that stuff hasn't been there yet. And I'm okay with that. I think the real win here is that he's playing all the snaps, he's competitive, and that his movement skills are fine. And as I think he gets reps, I think he's going to get more confident, and he's going to play faster, and he's going to be Trey White as we remember him being. Brian says, last year, if I remember correctly, McDermott had some concerns about Greg Rousseau hitting the rookie wall. With the depth available to him at corner this year that he didn't have behind Rousseau, is it possible that McDermott is just holding out Kyer Elam to try to keep him fresh for the playoffs? Feels like that might make most sense because of the head-scratching inactives and lack of playing time coincided around the time the college season would end. I don't know. I think here's the reality, and I know this is kind of weird. The Bills have this group of corners in Trey White, Dane Jackson, Kyer Elam, Christian Benford, Xavier Rhodes, 5 guys, and I really do think that it could be about finding combinations here, and Sean taking each week as an opportunity to evaluate how those guys play together and how they communicate. And can accomplish the objectives of the scheme that week. And so that's where I'm at with it. I've watched Kyer Elam play this year, and I thought he's played well. The only game I thought he had some issues was the Pittsburgh game, and that was very much a game plan specific situation for the Steelers to move the launch point for Kenny Pickett, isolate George Pickens, and throw him the ball. And for a lot of those opportunities, it came with Kyer Elam in coverage. I don't think he's played bad. I wonder how much of this is Kyer Elam's ability to execute zone principles. And, you know, you can't space the field bad and play zone coverage. You're going to have coverage busts, and teams are going to throw the ball all over the place on you. So that's the piece of it that, like, you can have any opinion that you want about Kyer Elam, but the one thing that you don't know, and none of us know, is his actual ability to execute the zone coverage that Sean McDermott wants to deploy, right? We don't know that. Nobody here knows that. And I have to believe that plays into it. And, you know, coming out of college, he's a press man corner. And so you wonder just how ready he is to function in a zone heavy defense. Now, one of the big talking points into this Dolphins game is going to be if it is a game where they really unleash Kyer Elam, because the last 2 weeks, the Dolphins offense has stunk out loud. And the reason is because the 49ers and the Chargers were willing to play press man coverage against those receivers. Well, you got a guy that can do it in Kyer Elam. And so if he doesn't have a healthy role this week in a game where you should be willing to adapt your style of play to do what other teams have done to make the Dolphins offense not successful, that's going to be a strong indicator to us that, hey, it's not just that Kyer Elam is not ready to play every snap in zone coverage and they're more comfortable with other options. Now, the other part of that coin is going to be, well, do they play the Dolphins? They play a lot of press man coverage and be physical and get in the face of receivers at the line of scrimmage. Do they do that and not use Kyer Elam? Because if they play zone against the Dolphins and Kyer Elam doesn't play, well, then that doesn't give us the clue that we're looking for either. So there's some layers to this. I was surprised myself when I saw Xavier Rhodes was inactive in favor of Kyer Elam being active, and then he didn't play. You know, there's there's no easy explanation. I think we're all speculating. We're all kind of looking for answers. And sometimes Sean McDermott gives them to you where he's saying, hey, look, we're trying to find out what we have in other players. And maybe it's that simple. But, look at some of the opponents that are going to be coming here. You got the Bengals in a few weeks that have a really dynamic passing offense. It's inevitable that if you're going to go to the Super Bowl this year, you're going to have to play the Chiefs again. Obviously, they can throw the football. Miami is a team that can throw the football, obviously. Not the last couple weeks, but this season they've done well in that department. So surely this is about finding out the right mix of guys, but you're kind of running out of time here. And you'd like to get that group together and ride it out the rest of the way. But the Bills have options like they never have at corner. But I guess you kind of looked at that through the lens of Greg Rousseau hitting that rookie role and wanting to guard against that. I think Rousseau is a unique player as well because he didn't play football at all the year before he was drafted. And so his ramp up was really different than other guys. So I don't know if I look at it as Sean McDermott specifically saying we want to keep him fresh because at the end of the day, I mean, he hasn't really played that much this year in terms of an every down cornerback. So there's enough rambling on that. The reality is I don't have the answer. It's speculating, but that's how I feel about it. Hope you've been getting in on the action over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is my favorite daily fantasy resource. How does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available, and entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. So if you deposit 100, Prize Picks will give you 100. If you deposit 50, Prize Picks will give you 50. Just don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. The next one comes from Greg, who says, I just noticed that the other 3 teams most likely to receive home field advantage in the AFC, none of them have domes. Kansas City, Cincinnati, Baltimore. What are your thoughts on that? Well, I think in general, the AFC doesn't have a lot of domes. There's only 4 teams: Houston, Indy, the Chargers, and the Raiders. That's it, the whole list. And so if you're going to be an AFC team and you want to win playoff games, you're going to have to do it outside a lot of times. That's just the reality of it. So I'm glad that we've seen the Bills be able to handle, some tough elements, whether it was the Jets game this year, obviously the Patriots playoff game last year, Falcons game last year, Panthers game last year. You've had a lot of success in cold, wet, windy situations. So I know everyone wants to point to that hurricane game against the Patriots. Well, make 1 tackle on defense, don't have a million drop passes. There was some circumstances there. I thought the Bills were a far better team that game, but I think the Bills have generally been a team that's handled those dynamics quite well. And they've had a lot of experience over the last couple of years. And so bring on those boys from South Florida on Saturday night in Western New York, where it could be some elements, right? You want to be able to use that to your advantage. And the Bills are uniquely positioned to play their games outside in Western New York and have success. They should be. That should always be at the forefront of whoever the general manager is. That you want to be able to win home games late in the season in Western New York. So you better build a football team that can do that. Mihal says the Bills have it 4th and goal from the 2 in the Super Bowl with 2 seconds on the clock, down by 4. You are Ken Dorsey. What's the play call? Quarterback power with Josh Allen. That's what I'm running. Mitch Morse is going to be one of my lead blockers, and the ball is going to be in Josh Allen's hands with a head of steam and blockers in front of him. That's what I'm doing. No question about it. Matt says, not a Bills question, but what's your favorite holiday/Christmas season tradition? And what's one that you have that seems weird or unique? All right, so let's talk about Christmas time in the Marino household. We love the holiday season. I'll tell you that. My wife is very into all of the holidays, so we always decorate, and she's got all of her seasonal attire, right? It doesn't matter the holiday. It feels like my wife has outfits for it. And so that's now trickled down to my daughter, who has outfits for every holiday. But yeah, they're a big deal around here. We usually decorate our house a few days prior to Thanksgiving. And then the day after Thanksgiving, we drive to the North Carolina mountains, about 90 minutes from where I live. We cut down a tree, bring it home, decorate it. We started the Elf on the Shelf this year with our daughter, Rebecca Jean, who turns 3 in January. That has been really fun. Our Elf on the Shelf's name is Pearl. So Pearl, you know the deal with the Elf on the Shelf. We've done matching Christmas pajamas every year since we've had Rebecca, so this will be our 3rd year of that. I tried to go with Bill's pajamas this year, but management did not approve. So unfortunately, that didn't work out. But we will have some nice photos of us in matching pajamas. We do Christmas Eve with my side of the family, Christmas Day with hers. And then as for a weird or unique tradition, the only thing that I can think of here is that I stopped exchanging Christmas presents with adults. We stopped doing it about 5-6 years ago, maybe. Just we'd still obviously provide gifts for the kids, right? I have nieces and nephews and my own child. We love that. But my mom, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, friends, etc. We pulled the plug on that. It kind of just became stressful, expensive, and unnecessary. If somebody needs something, we'll be happy to meet that need. But everybody's gainfully employed and has everything they need. So we've shifted that gift exchange to just being for the kids, and I've loved that. It's just about the food, the family, the company, just being around each other at the holidays and allowing the kids to enjoy the gift giving component. So that's probably the most unique thing in my opinion. But whatever. I'm not saying everybody should do that, but for us, that's how we do it. So there's that. All right, Stephanie. We'll close out with Stephanie. Stephanie has a question and then a comment that I think is perfect to close. So the question from Stephanie is, I got this from a ton of people. I could have sworn you covered this, but I can't find it. What do you attribute our 3rd and long troubles to on defense? I'll tell you, my message here has been the same. I don't know that I can sit here and say it's one thing, right? But when you look at the Bills' defense, I don't think they tackle well. I don't think they rush the passer consistently well. Their defensive backs don't play the ball in the air very well, and they've had a lot of injuries on defense. So why are they inconsistent on 3rd and longs? Well, that's it. It's those things. They don't tackle well. They don't rush the passer consistently well. They don't play the ball in the air well. And they've had a ton of injuries on defense. That, to me, it's that. It's a combination of all of that. But, man, these missed tackles are killing me. They had 16 against the Jets. Damar Hamlin had 5. Damar Hamlin has a 20% missed tackle rate this year. Dane Jackson's like 18%. Matt Milano's like 15.5%. Bills' defense sucks at tackling. They just do. And it drives me crazy because it's just free yards that you're giving the other team. I mean, you had 16 missed tackles. The Jets ran 74 plays. So how many of those were incomplete passes where there was no tackle made? I guess they probably threw 15 or so incomplete passes. So you missed a tackle on 16 of the 60 plays that you could make a tackle. It's not good enough. The Bills have got to figure out their tackling issues. It's not just a this year thing. It's been every year under Sean McDermott. And it drives me nuts. As for the comment that Stephanie had that's going to close us out today, Stephanie says, I also want to bring some optimism to Bills Mafia. I honestly feel pretty good about that win. I don't mind winning these ugly games, especially because we're 10-3 and still the number 1 seed. We haven't been playing anywhere near our potential offensively lately, and we are resilient as hell. If we can harness our offensive firepower again, we're going to be the scary team we know we're capable of being in the playoffs. Thanks, and go Bills. It's a great message to send us off here, Stephanie. Appreciate you sending that in. All right, folks, tomorrow we turn our attention to the Bills' opponent this week, the Miami Dolphins. So our primer is coming tomorrow. We'll talk to Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins on Thursday, do our thing that we do on Friday here the rest of the week. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you are subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.